What's up, you jackwagons? I'm Speed Fury, and I'm back with another brand new My Hero Academia What If. Now, this one is going to be a bit different because this one's not solely focused around Izuku. This one's actually focused around at least half of Class 1A. And as you can tell from the title, this is what if half of Class 1A had the powers of iconic characters. Now, when I say iconic characters, I don't mean characters that are from different anime. I'm not doing things like that. These characters are not from different anime. Well, one of them technically is, but we'll get around to that. For starters, let's talk about what Izuku's quirk is going to be. He's going to have a different quirk, and his quirk isn't going to make him look any different. It's not going to be a mutation quirk. It's going to be an emitter quirk, and partial transformation. His quirk will be called Copy. Now, he's not necessarily doesn't work the same way Monoma's quirk works. This works completely different. I'm just going to cut to the chase. He has Kirby's powers from, well, the Kirby series. Why did I decide to give him Kirby powers? I honestly couldn't think of anybody else, and I wanted a character that fit Izuku's personality, who had just as pure of a heart as he did. And it is discussed multiple times in the Kirby games that Kirby is a pure-hearted warrior. So why not have it be Kirby? And so no, his skin's not going to be pink or anything, but how it works is that he has to inhale certain elemental properties. So say like he inhales a feather, he'll transform into Wing Izuku. And yes, his hero name is going to be Kirby as well, but not for the reason that Kirby exists. Let's just say for this what if none of the characters the characters get their powers from exist in this universe as games or anything else. So they'll pretty much just be. He'll get his name from the actual Kirby vacuums. Anyway, so we start out when Izuku is heading to the doctor, and as he's going to the doctor, the doctor does some tests. We're not doing Garaki. This is a different doctor entirely. And while these tests are going through, they try to figure out what it could be. He clearly does have the quirk factor in him, but it's for some reason they're not able to figure things out. But when they're experimenting with a machine, the machine seems to have a malfunction and blows up. This results in shrapnel heading towards where Izuku is. When this happens, Izuku actually opens his mouth to scream, and one of the pieces of shrapnel goes into his mouth. When this happens, he actually ends up swallowing it, but it doesn't hurt him in any way. After swallowing it, two large, let's say, shoulder cannons appeared on his back, with two metal gloves appearing on his hands, and a helmet appearing on his head. His body, some of his other parts of his body, like his feet transforming into boots, also appeared. This is basically Mech Kirby. If you don't know what Mecha Kirby is, it's one of the newer copy abilities from the new Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe game. Look it up if you want to see what it is. Wait, actually, I have a better idea. Since I have the game, I might as well just show you the copy abilities. That way, it'll be easier. I have a few Kirby games though, so it's gonna be different for each one. Let me just grab my phone. Ooh, I'm gonna fall off. All right, there we go. Had to set the phone up on my recording station. Anyway, so basically, after he finds out what his quirk is, and messes around with it for a bit, first thing he wants to do is learn how to use the mecha form that he got, and to actually be able to use his mecha form, he has to actually swallow a piece of metal to actually be able to use it. So, let me show you what his mecha form can do. So this is Mecha Kirby right here. And specifically, he has to do everything that Kirby would do in this one. I know Kirby doesn't have the metal boots that I said Izuku has, but Izuku's got a more humanoid form than Kirby does. So this is how it'll work. He has several different moves. For one, he can just blast a laser, like that, or he can charge it, like this. And depending on how long he holds it, depends on how powerful it'll be. And then he also has this Plasma Fist punch that he does, where he can just, like, punch his opponent. Let me real quick see if there's there's a test dummy up here. So that's how that works. If he gets close enough to somebody, he can actually hit somebody with a flaming palm. When he crouches down, he also has access to shooting a late. Hold on a second. Let me move this guy over here. To shooting multiple fire shots like this. He can also fire 2 little torpedoes from his back into like little fireballs. And he can also create a large explosion from his hands. Unfortunately, this leaves him open. Shoots electricity and fire from his hands, and electricity from his guns. His final move is one of his stronger moves, but unfortunately, it drains him quite a bit if he uses too much of it. He uses it too many times, I mean, which is this. He pretty much just does a combination move. When he tells Katsuki about his amazing copy quirk, at first Bakugo says that he needs help to get his new power, saying that his power is pretty much just useless unless he can actually, fight without it. And even then, that would be him being quirkless. So Katsuki's still a jerk in this universe. And this results in Izuku being bullied as usual, only the only problem is, though, most of Bakugo's attacks don't really hit him, because Izuku found out that he's also pretty much immune to anything Bakugo can throw at him, because he can literally just eat all of his explosions. Unfortunately, this also had the rare case that he could either fire the explosions back at Katsuki, or he could like, swallow it and take his powers. Or not take his power specifically, but get powers from it. One day this actually happened, which resulted in Fire Izuku. This gave him the ability to breathe fire, which is also this too, and dash it while in the form of a fireball. Bakugo realized that he wasn't actually full-on copying his quirk, but still got something out of what he had. So he still pretty much said that he's just copying somebody else's ability, but using it differently. This would go on for a few years, where Izuku actually wouldn't be bothered by much of what Katsuki says, because at the end of the day, while he might need the power, might need to have somebody else to actually engage his powers, he doesn't actually have to take it from somebody else. As he learned from his mecha transformation, he doesn't actually need to copy someone else's quirk. He can do it from other objects. So, instead of going after other people's quirks to figure it out, he actually went looking for other kinds of tools and stuff. One of the things he found was a hedgehog one day. I'm just going to say hedgehogs that can be found in Japan in this story. And he managed to pluck a quill off of the hedgehog, even though it was like not really liking him that much, and got his needle ability, which is this thing. He could send spikes all over his body like this and shoot them off. Yeah, like that. He can also turn into a ball and run people over. And if push came to shove and he couldn't reach somebody high enough, he could shoot his very long needle upwards. Unfortunately, he couldn't really do much with the needle ability besides that. He began looking into other things. He tried to swallow a leaf, and got, of course, his leaf ability. He found out that he could actually turn himself into a pile of leaves to hide or like blow himself away if needed to. Kirby can't do it in this game, but I'm improvising here. He could also shoot leaves at people, which were actually razor sharp. He could turn into a leaf tornado as well, and he could use little vines from the ground to attack people. He then started getting into weapons. He wanted to learn how to use different weapons. So what he decided to do was he decided to order a couple of model weapons. Of course, these would actually be real weapons, but nowadays nobody uses weapons. They all use quirks. So he bought them specifically for display, but he was going to still use them as training, in case he ever came across something that he could use as a sword. Eventually, he got used to using, well, a sword, And eventually, he didn't want to really get rid of his models though, because that would basically be him getting rid of them. I mean, like if he ate any of his weapons, he would basically just lose it, and you'd have to buy another one. And he really didn't want to go through all that trouble. So after training, he learned how to use the sword, to where he could pull off combos. He could also shoot beams out of the sword like that. There's really not much to go on besides the sword. Also, imagine every single one of his forms has the same stuff that Kirby wears when he has it. So like his hair will burst into flames when he gets the fire ability. He'll have all these little spikes on his head when he's got the needle. Same with the leaf. Mostly this looks like his regular hair, just like with a more lighter color. He also bought himself a boomerang, because boomerangs could be weapons too, which he later learned he could also use as a copy ability. He can also throw bigger boomerangs. This is literally all he can do with this one. He can melee, but it doesn't really help all that much, because it's more of a ranged weapon. He also figured he wanted to learn how to use other kinds of weapons too. Turns out that his quirk was a lot more versatile than it seemed. For instance, one day he and his mother were just taking a stroll outside, and it started raining. This also had the unfortunate effect of a thunderstrike happening. Izuku at this point had actually had plenty of practice learning how to react and stuff. He'd taken some fighting classes to learn how to fight and stuff, and to raise his pretty much awareness. So when the lightning bolt came down, he actually reacted fast enough to actually inhale the lightning, transforming him into this plasma form. And if he realized that if he moved around a lot, or at least, I'm going to say he rotated his arms at enough speed, he could charge up his electricity and then fire it. Depending on how long he charged it, depends on how much power it has behind it. He also could fire electricity upwards and downwards. But that's kind of all he could do. Let's just say he could fire electricity, but like not specifically just up and down. Excuse me. Well, he also wanted to learn how to he's pretty much learned everything he can. But he would try and find other tools every now and then. He even bought a toy mimic wand of an anime he saw once, which gave him this ability. Beam. I didn't mean to do that. And like with most of his other attacks, he could charge it up for long distances, but the attacks that he has to charge, and the more stronger attacks, will result in him getting tired quicker. One of his attacks in this form that got him really tired was this one. I forgot how to do this one. I don't remember how to do this one. I forgot how to do this. How do I do this? Hold on a second, let me put the pause menu and check. Beam Blast. Oh, here we go. There we go, that's how I do it. I tried to do that a second ago, why didn't it work? Anyway, doing that forever really drains his stamina, because it can as long as he keeps it going, it pretty much provides him with a shield. Only problem is, yeah, it drains his health fast. I mean, not his health, his stamina. Anyway, like I said, he bought a bunch of like replica weapons to learn how to use them, and he figured out what he would have to inhale in order to how to use them. For instance, if he wanted to use a whip, he would have to like inhale a rope or like some string. Surprisingly enough, he also found out that he could also use an umbrella for a weapon. And it also gave him weird physics where he could actually just float down without, like, any resistance. Like that. Surprisingly, the umbrella ability was kind of powerful. So he was glad that he managed to keep one with him whenever he was out in the rain. Or just out whenever, in case he needed to have the umbrella ability. Unfortunately, he can't use he can't use a regular umbrella, because the umbrella what the heck just fell? Oh no, I just hit that, never mind. Anyway, the umbrella the umbrella ability only works if he actually eats the umbrella. Otherwise, he can't really use the power with a regular one. Because the umbrella he has while he's in the copy ability actually is powerful and is meant to be a weapon. His least favorite ability, as of now, is sand. I'm not saying that because sand is my least favorite ability. I just don't like. I'm just saying he doesn't like it because he has to eat sand, and sand tastes gross. Basically, he has to eat sand or dirt to get this form. But he likes the fact that he can just summon a giant sandcastle to fall on top of somebody. He can also make fists of sand, too. And he can hide in the sand, and then launch himself out of it. He can just make as many sandcastles as he wants, though. This would be useful for him when he has to hide from Bakugo. He could just eat some dirt and then hide in the sandcastle. The very overly sized sandcastle. He learned that he actually had to learn control with his quirk because it turns out that water counts as if he drinks water he actually has to like mentally turn off his quirk. Otherwise, he just ends up using the water ability. And he can also surf on, like, when there's no water. He can just surf around and make tidal waves. Several students didn't actually notice that his water ability was a good way to counter Bakugo, because if he got him wet enough, he couldn't really do anything. He could also spray water out of his mouth, and like so. And he could, with his hair turning into water, he could actually control the water in his hair to do this. Just imagine it as like a very wet headbutt. The more he experimented with different quirks, the more power he could use. One of his more useful ones were the stuff he could find around him. Unfortunately for him, even though he didn't like the sand ability that much, it would be one of the ones he used most often, because there would be dirt around. The main copy abilities he would use most often would be stone, sand, and leaf, because of the fact that there were trees all around, and he could also get leaf from eating other kinds of plants and stuff. Sand, because there was always dirt somewhere around, and stone, because he could literally just eat a side of a building. Usually he resorts to eating like part of the road or something, though, because specifically a small part of the road, he doesn't need to eat like the whole road. He found a couple of stranger abilities, but when he ate something that shouldn't have really affected him all that much. Like the time he ate a cape. Yes, he ate a cape. He ate a cape and he got the ability to jump really high. That was kind of all it did, though. But at least he could feel like he was flying for a little bit. The ability other than that wasn't really all that much to write home about. One of the stranger ones he found was when he accidentally ate a top out of reflex when it was flying towards him. He suddenly found the ability to actually spin on his own and turn into a tornado. That's kind of all he could do, but he could also send tornadoes after people as well. A lot of people did not like this ability because it also resulted in people getting taken off their feet from all the wind pressure. One of the abilities he couldn't have access to as often was the ice ability. He liked the ice ability, it gave him more speed, but it wasn't really available a lot of the time because he needed to inhale something cold, and there aren't a lot of cold foods around for him to eat. But whenever he got the chance, he used it. He could shoot ice breath, surround himself with an ice vortex, or like a little ice barrier, and turn himself into a little ice ball. He'd also make a little tornado of ice, but only when he's in the air, surprisingly. Like a lot of the other weapons he found, Spear was one that he tended to use quite a bit. But he had to, unlike just like a lot of the other bladed weapon abilities he could use, unfortunately he actually had to decide which one of them he was going to use. All of his weapon abilities could easily be triggered by him inhaling something sharp, razor sharp, and he actually would have to mentally choose which one of his bladed weapon abilities to use. His spear, cutter, and sword ability were three of those that he had trouble with. He liked all three of them, but he mostly liked the spear for the longer reach. He could also throw them, and for some reason he found out he could throw three at the same time. Not really knowing how that's possible, but he still did it. He could also fly with it for a short time, which really confused Katsuki when he was trying to chase Deku, and he started flying away by spinning a spear. Bakugo would constantly yell at Izuku, telling him that his quirk was bullshit and shouldn't work like that. Izuku would even get some powers from animals too, like a bird. He inhaled a feather one time, or ate a feather, and it gave him the ability to fly and shoot razor sharp feathers out of his wings. He could also fly really quickly, surprisingly, even though he was only a bird. And apparently he didn't matter what bird he inhaled as long as it was a bird. Or not a bird, but a feather. Also turned out whenever he would get any kind of debris thrown at him when Katsuki was attacking him, if he inhaled that, it would actually give him a different ability entirely. An ability he just named Fighter, because it gave him kung fu skills. More than he had already. He could even fire Hadokens from that famous game Street Fighter. And Shoryukens. Katsuki really didn't like this ability, which meant he had to be careful with where he was shooting explosions, because if he blew something up and broke it, he could inhale it and turn it into Fighter Kirby. Also, I'm pulling that from the anime. That's how Kirby got his fighter ability in the anime, is that he would have to actually inhale something that was thrown at him from an enemy. For the most part, all of his copy abilities could easily be found right off the bat. But there were some abilities he discovered that he couldn't actually use as long as he wanted to. One of those abilities was his mic ability, which he got after inhaling a microphone by accident. He was actually exploring with his mother and found an old kid's toy that just happened to have a microphone in it. He inhaled it to see what would happen, not really expecting anything to happen. Turns out he just got the ability to scream really loud, and it would send sound waves to people. Unfortunately, he can only use this 3 times before losing it entirely. This was unfortunate for him because he really wanted to use them more often. And inhaling an instrument gave him the ability called Festival, where anybody around him would be forced to dance with him, and for some reason would also make an explosion. That power didn't really make any sense, and he only really had a one shot at it. There was also that one time where he found out about his probably most strongest ability, but one he won't ever get to use, like ever. He has to specifically inhale a bomb. It can't. Unfortunately, it's only bombs. That's the only thing that triggers this ability. This ability he named Crash because it makes everything just crash and get destroyed. And he can only use it once. Later, he found a new ability that also came from the sharp weapons he inhaled, but mostly weapons that were specifically used by ninja, specifically katanas and shurikens. This gave him the ability to throw random kunai that he could just make materialize, slash enemies with a katana, and cause smoke bombs. He could also cling onto walls with, no resistance. He could just stick to walls like Spider-Man and throw kunai at people. He also found out that hammers give him an ability too. Just a big hammer. That's literally all there is to it. I don't really think I need to explain anything else. Anyway, that's all the copy abilities in this game. But then there were the stranger copy abilities. One such copy ability resulted in, well, long story short, he was adventuring one day and found out that he could actually force people to fight for him, or like help him in a fight. Now he didn't really like this ability that much because but he could turn it off at any time. But he could basically turn villains to the good side briefly, and they would actually be good. But once he turns it off, they go back to the way they were before. I'm basically just stealing this from Kirby Star Allies. That's Kirby's special ability in that game. He also found out about a rather more unfortunate ability that he really didn't like because it made him look ridiculous. That ability resulted in whatever he if he tried to eat anything too big, it resulted in his entire body wrapping around most of the object. He could still control himself while in this one, which he actually used he's used only once to go and get a, what's it called? To go and get a car and drive with the car. And this, the main reason he didn't like this is because of the fact that he looked ridiculous. He was basically just his entire body wrapped around the car. And while that isn't really something that's gross for Kirby's perspective, seeing a human do that is just kind of odd looking. Also, he can apparently do it to guns too. But he has to eat two if he wants to have two guns. And if he wants to have like a super cool gun, he has to inhale like a toy of a space gun or something. Each one of these three abilities did something different. With inhaling a regular gun, giving him the ability just to like shoot little stars out of the gun. That's kind of all it does, though. As for the two guns, they shoot more things at a time. But the downside to it is that the blasts are a bit weaker. But his favorite one out of all the guns was definitely his space guns, which luckily for him, he managed to keep a bunch of toy space guns, just in case he managed to find any or like buy any, in case he didn't run out. Because thanks to the fact that his quirk is very specific on what he has to inhale with some of the objects, it results in him not actually being able to do a lot. But luckily for him, the space gun is his favorite because of the fact that he can literally create black holes. But that's kind of it. He also learned that he can actually have two hammers at the same time. For some reason, though, these hammers seem to be able to summon tornadoes of fire. That was a question to him. He also questioned why the pig mask appeared on his face. He didn't really think anything of it, though. But eventually, Izuku, after learning about all these different abilities he could find, he decided that maybe he should take a break from finding things, and maybe he could use his power for something else. He does always seem to be hungry, so why not go and enter a food competition to see how well he could do? Which he did so. And he actually made it to the finals, where he met the current champion of the food eating contests. This champion wore a rather odd getup that made him look a little bit like Santa Claus, but he also didn't entirely because he also had like a weird little shirt underneath. The man also had fluff around the entire jacket and was rather heavy set, but he also was very much quite quick for his size. The man was known as the King of Eating Food, or the current champion of the food eating contests. They called him the King Devour. And he was obviously from another country because he didn't seem to have he seemed to have an accent while speaking Japanese. An accent that Izuku later learned was a New Orleans accent. And he very much respected Izuku after he beat him, saying that he's like a bottomless pit and he hopes to challenge him again, where he'll clobber him in the next match. Which led to Izuku showing up multiple times later in little food eating contests and still beating him each time. But at the end of the day, he and the King Devour were still good friends. He also learned that the more he trained with abilities, the stronger they got. He did this with the fire ability until eventually he could actually fly around with it. He could sprout the wings of fire and actually fly. And if he hit anybody with his fire, it would actually leave a burn that would last for a while. This resulted in some pro heroes actually noticing this and actually becoming quite interested. One of the times where he accidentally inhaled two abilities when he was only trying to get his stone ability is where he was inhaling a stone while Katsuki tried to blindside him, and he ended up inhaling one of his explosions too, resulting in his volcano fire. He could literally breathe lava rocks, and he didn't know how. He found out that if he inhaled a frisbee, he could use basically what was essentially a souped-up version of his cutter ability, where he threw two chakrams instead of a regular boomerang cutter. He could also charge them while they were away from him to make them bigger, and then when he brings them back, they do a lot more heavy damage. He also learned that if he inhaled other weaponry with certain weapons, he could get stronger versions of his weapon abilities, like his sword ability. Where, for instance, if he inhaled a sharp object with a piece of stone, he would end up with this sword that he named Giga Sword. I know it says Gigant Sword, but I'm not gonna call it that because there's no reason to in this one. The Gigant Sword was heavier and was swung around a lot slower and did a lot more damage, but he didn't use it as often because of how slow it was. If he ate let's say a piece of black fabric with his sword, he would don a mask instead of the normal hat, and he would grow bat wings out of his back, allowing him to fly. He could also shoot large beams out of his sword with it when he would slash with it. He also found out that he actually could only fly when using abilities that gave him wings or that were solely based around air or flying of some kind. So yeah, I'm not giving him Kirby's ability to normally fly around, like this. There was that one time, though, where he accidentally ate a butterfly while he was eating a sword. This resulted in a more, a transformation that he didn't really like that much, just due to the fact that he accidentally ate a living creature. But he did like the fact that he could teleport. And create sound waves. How do I do that again? I forgot how to do that. There we go. He could also send shadows at enemies, too, if he so desired. Now, how do I do that, actually? Oh, here we go. He can send little shadows at his enemies to fight them, too. But his most favorite part about the ability, even though it required him to eat a bug, was that he could make the sword giant. One day, though, he found himself exploring, trying to figure out what new copy abilities he could come up with, and he ran into a girl that had pink skin and long, darker shade of pink hair. This is Mina Ashido, for those of you who don't know, and she's one of the characters who I'm changing the ability of to an iconic character. The girl seemingly was setting something up. It looked like a party of some kind. Izuku walked over and asked what she was doing, and she said, "I'm throwing a party." He asked, "For who?" She's like, "No reason, just because I want to." And Izuku said, "Can I help?" She agrees, and so they just set up a party. Also, she seemed to be able to pull stuff out of her hair that shouldn't fit in there. She pulled out a whole cannon at one point. A cannon that shot confetti, but still a cannon. And it wasn't big enough to actually be any real threat. She also could make sprinkles explode. Her power was strange. He asked what her quirk was, and she said it was just called Party. that she could literally do whatever she wanted to as long as it revolved around a party. Most of the stuff which she pulls from her hair. As long as it was party related, she could do it. So for those of you who are wondering what iconic character her powers came from, I mean where Mina's new powers come from. Also, I should mention she has longer hair now. Like, it goes down to her back long. So let me explain as to where her new powers come from. So I needed to use a character that had Mina's color scheme, being pink and having pink hair still. And luckily, or unluckily, depends on how you look at the situation, I happen to know the perfect character. Pinkie Pie. Not the Pinkie Pie from My Little Pony, the Pinkie Pie from MLP Equestria Girls, which is just an alternate dimension where Pinkie Pie is a human instead of a pony. But I decided to kind of experiment with the power because in the series she actually has the ability to make sprinkles explode. But I decided to throw some other stuff in there too from the pony version. Why do I know so much about it? Because I used to be a brony. I'm not anymore, but I used to be. And luckily, that information helped me come up with the iconic character for Mina Ashido. Anyway, it wasn't long before both of them had to part ways, but they kept in touch, with Mina being basically Izuku's newest friend and only current friend that he had at the moment. Later, Mina would introduce Izuku to her friend Kirishima, which he would have told Izuku about how he wants to be a hero and learn to not hesitate. Because at this point in time, they're 13. They're going to be going to UA soon, but just not yet. As for what Kirishima had for his quirk, well, he just has the same quirk as he has in canon. I'm not changing all the characters to have different quirks, just half the class. A few years would pass, and they would pretty much be close friends, with Inko finally being happy that her son has friends now. But then we get to the slime villain. At this point, Katsuki would be, of course, taken by the slime villain, and Izuku would actually be nowhere in sight this time around. Because unlike in canon, Izuku didn't actually go through that way, because he was hanging out with Kirishima and Mina. But they did pass through that area where the villain was happening, and Izuku would, of course, spring into action, going to save Katsuki. And the sludge villain was terrified at the fact that no matter what he threw at Izuku, he would inhale it and shoot it back at him, or actually swallow it and get powers from it. This was both disturbing to him and not fair at all. Eventually, he got close enough and actually used his inhaling ability to actually pull Bakugo towards him. Which before, and the sludge villain would try to stop him at this point, but then he would get hit in the face with exploding sprinkles, shot directly from the party cannon that Mina used. They all managed to get away, and All Might defeated the villain, with him then catching up with Izuku and his friends to tell him about the fact that he had the mark of a true hero and that he wanted to give him one for all. Izuku at first was unsure about this, but eventually he decided, sure, I'll be your successor. And of course, normally this would result in all the training, but the thing is, the training wouldn't really have done much because Midoriya's already broken as heck and has plenty of powers. But he still does clean the beach, specifically by eating all of it. And what he didn't eat, he just basically destroyed with his mech power, because thanks to all the metal around, he could just turn into mecha multiple times. And it was done rather quickly. Now, Mina and Kirishima both know that he has who All Might is and what his power is, that he's going to pass it to Izuku, but they keep quiet about it. The day finally comes where he passes it on, and All Might simply says, "Eat this. Without your quirk, I don't want you to have this temporarily." Izuku realizes this and swallows the hair without using his power, which he did not enjoy in the slightest. But little did he know that One for All would actually affect his quirk differently. More differently than he realized. The day soon came for the entrance exam. Of course, with Bakugo still being a jerk and not really accepting the fact that Izuku saved him, still saying that he needs help from somebody else to actually give him power. Normally things would go down where Ida would get after Izuku for mumbling, but Izuku doesn't really mumble that much in this one. He does, but not outwardly. He mumbles kind of internally. But he does kind of get after Ida for interrupting President Mike, because he was going to get around to what about the zero pointer and stuff. When the time comes that they get ready to go and take the test, Izuku finds that beating these robots is kind of easy considering how much practice he's had with his quirk and with his physical body. But then something strange happens. While he's fighting one of the bots, he hits it to destroy it, but after destroying it, the bot seems to put itself back together, but not attack him again. It's turned off. Not really understanding this, he also notices that the robot for some reason has gained a seat for him to sit in. Not really thinking too much of it, he goes over to investigate and sits in the robot. The robot then turns a lighter shade of green to match his hair, and even gains a face more similar to his. The robot then starts to control the robot, realizing that it kind of just came to him that he could control this robot now. He tried to see if he could connect his quirk with this somehow, and tries to see if he can make the robot, well, use any of his powers that he had with his quirk. And surprisingly, it could. The robot scanned a nearby piece of metal and transformed, with it having replaced its arms with two long swords. It still had the machine guns, but it had swords attached to the machine guns now. Him seeing this said, "Holy crap, I couldn't do this before. Does this have to do with One for All?" Meanwhile, the teachers were stunned, confused at what the heck this kid's quirk was. How was he able to take control of the robot? Not only that, but make his quirk be channeled through it. If you're wondering where this is coming from, play the game Kirby Planet Robobot. And as he's experimenting with this robot more, he's realizing he's ranking up a lot of points, basically using the robots against one another. And then the zero pointer shows up, and he sees a brown-haired girl who's jumping from the zero pointer to the building next to it over and over again, as though she's like wall jumping, trying to get up higher to it. Every time she jumps, though, there was an odd little noise that sounded like a video game noise, going boom, boom, boom every time she jumped. But as she got up to the top of it, she reached into her pocket and pulled out what looked like a flower, and then she ate the flower. Izuku wondered if she had a ability similar to his. Then to his shock, her clothes turned into a red and white color before she began shooting fireballs at it. But the fireballs weren't really doing much because it was a giant robot. So Izuku decided to go and help. Started slashing the robot with his little mech suit that he was driving. They did take the zero pointer down, mostly just because they wanted to make sure nobody else got hurt. And Izuku introduced himself to the girl, saying his name, and the girl introduced herself to him, being Ochako Uraraka. And yes, I did change Ochako Uraraka's quirk to an iconic character. She's Mario. Yes, I made her into Super Mario, basically. I thought it would be a great power, since Ochako's power before was basically involved her like making herself weightless and floating. So why not like take that a step further and give her the abilities of Mario? How does her power work? Just imagine basically so it works the same as what you'd imagine Mario's powers would be, but like it doesn't matter what kind of thing she eats. For instance, any kind of flower she eats, as long as it's like in the same color spectrum as the original fire and fire flower and ice flowers, they will give her those respective abilities. For instance, if she eats a flower that's either red, orange, or yellow, or somewhere around that color, it'll turn her into Fire Uraraka. If she eats anything that is like in the green, blue, or purple colors, then she'll turn into Ice Uraraka. Now, how's the penguins gonna work? I don't know. I'll figure that out when I come to it. Let's see. There's also other things like, say, how does she access the invincibility star? Well, that one I'm still trying to come up with too. But I was thinking of like having her access it by. So let's say that for Uraraka to activate the star invincibility ability, she has to actually eat specifically her favorite food, which is mochi. Why am I saying that? Because I really don't have any other way for her to access that. Now, there's one more thing I forgot to mention. Izuku also has an invincibility form, but it lasts not as long. It doesn't last very long, just like Uraraka's invincibility form. Unfortunately, his ability is more common to come across than Uraraka's is, and they all found this out rather quickly. Izuku already knew about this, and so did his friends, but they were all hanging out after the entrance exam, and Uraraka offered Izuku some candy. Mina and Kirishima immediately tried to stop her, but unfortunately, he managed to eat it, and he actually can't control this one. Just oddly enough, Uraraka and Izuku also have a similar way that this ability works. They can't anything that touches them gets hurt really bad if it's like organic and stuff, and anything that and also some random music starts playing whenever it happens. For Izuku, anytime he eats candy, he gets covered in a multicolored light, and this music starts playing. And Uraraka found out that this was actually kind of funny because she had a similar ability, and you'd know how the Super Invincibility Mario music goes. But Izuku, while in this state, actually kind of like goes into like full on sugar rush mode and just kind of runs all over the place and smashes into stuff. This is why a lot of people don't like him using this power because of the fact that he can't control it and he just like completely goes into like sugar rush child mode, even if he is like in like 15 now. But of course, they would all get in, and when they get there, they noticed a few students that were kind of off. And they were particularly drawn to a student who was sitting over by the window. He had two-tone hair, white and red, but that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was the sclera in his eyes was black, and his eyes were different colors, but you couldn't really tell that with his left eye. His left eye seemed to only be a little white dot, while his right eye was a Wait, no, it's the other way around. His right eye was a little white dot, but his left eye seemed to be a blue color, or turquoise or something. Unlike everybody else, though, he wasn't wearing just the UA uniform. He was wearing a blue hoodie over the uniform, and he also had a kind of like absent-minded grin on his face and was just kind of like staring off into space. He had his hands in the pockets of the hoodie and was just sitting there, not really paying attention to what was going on, because the teacher wasn't there at the moment, so he didn't really feel the need to. Izuku would go over to introduce himself to him and say what his name was, and ask what his name is. And the boy would say his name was Shoto Todoroki, saying that he's the son of Endeavor. And Izuku would say tell him that he's not really a big fan of Endeavor with the way he kind of acts and stuff. And Todoroki would simply respond with, "Yeah, me neither. He's kind of, well, I'm just going to be honest, he's a jerk. And he's very abusive." Unlike in canon, this version of Todoroki is kind of a little bit different. He's not as quiet as everybody as he is in the original, but he will talk to you if you talk to him first, and he's all for making friends. But the reason he's here is not because of his dad. The reason he's here is because he wants to basically surpass his dad and show him that he doesn't need to be like a perfect hybrid. Unlike in canon, Shoto's actually isn't actually he was trained just as hard, but unlike in canon, he never really he didn't really get resentment. He still resents his father, and he still has the scar from what his mother did to him, but he holds nothing against them, and he really does hate his father still, but he prefers to like pretend that he's not even related to him, and which angers his father because his son never listens to him, and every time he tries to punish him, he seemingly can't even land a finger on him because he keeps dodging everything he does. And when he's asked what his quirk is, he simply smiles and says, I'll let you know later. I'm not really one for sharing the details of my quirk. At least not yet. I'll let you know when the sports festival comes up or whenever I gotta show it. If you're wondering what Todoroki's power is, I'm pretty sure you can guess by his more laid-back personality and the fact that I stated what color his jacket is, and the fact that he has black sclera and one of his eyes is blue. I'm not really going to say what character he got his powers from, but we'll end it, let's say, there for now, and I'll introduce other characters later. See you next time.